Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here tonight. I am thrilled to be with you this evening. I'm Tara Lavick. I'm the director of the New Dentist Committee here. So I have the pleasure of working with the wonderful group of New Dentist Committee members from across the country. And they are the ones who put together these town hall events. And this is one of many that we've been offering. And we're really glad to have you here with us. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Camryn Bryant, who will be serving as the moderator this evening to get us started. So take it away, Dr. Bryant.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tara, and thanks for everybody being here with us tonight. Like Tara said, I'm on the New Dentist Committee and super happy to be here. I am from Arkansas, and as a member of the NDC, we try and advise the ADA on some good things that we can strive towards for new dentists and continue these things, be transparent and honest with you guys on what we're facing, how it's similar to what you guys are facing, and let the ADA know those things that are happening. So for tonight's town hall, we're excited to have some great people with us. It's going to be on financial planning, and again, the big topic of being unfiltered, being open and honest with everyone. We want to learn about today's environment, including like interest rates and how student loans work. Have some open conversations on financial matters as a new dentist, because I know things change as we go through our careers, and then share resources and tools that we can use as new dentists and everything as we can move forward. So let's get into our panelists tonight. So I have some wonderful panelists with me tonight from the New Dentist Committee. We have two people from the New Dentist Committee with us, as well as two experts in their field. So I'm going to start off with our New Dentist Committee members, Dr. Sean Aiken and Dr. Howard Kim. I've had the pleasure of serving with them on the New Dentist Committee, and they are awesome. So Dr. Aiken, would you mind introducing yourself for me?
Sure thing. Thanks, Cameron. My name is Sean Aiken. I am a 2018 University of Louisville grad. Go Cards, repping even despite our 2 losses this weekend. I'm a practice owner. I bought a practice 18 months out of dental school and have bought 2 more since then. I'm married. We have an 18-month-old daughter at home named Charlotte. And I graduated with a little over $400,000 in student debt. So I'm happy to share that story with you guys tonight.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Aiken. Dr. Kim, would you mind continuing on and introducing yourself for me?
Well, thank you, Cameron. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We want to definitely share our stories, especially our mistakes. But I was born in the land of K-pop, BTS, Squid Games. But I did go to college and dental school here. I graduated in 2014 from USC, Go Trojans. Basically, my practice situation in general, I believe I have a unique perspective because my first half of my career, I was with the DSO. After that, I was with the private practice for a few years, and now I'm currently the regional dental director of a federally qualified health center, a community health center in Los Angeles. And I've made plenty of mistakes. I've made plenty of choices along the way. I've just become hyper aware of my financial situation because my wife and I, we have a 2-month-old daughter. She's a beautiful little lady. But we've had to make some financial decisions this year and last year where we really delved into the specifics, and hopefully we'll be in a good place when our daughter is ready for college. And we want to provide the best for our daughter. And obviously my wife and I, we don't want to work until we're 70 or 80 years old. So I look forward to this talk, and we have a wonderful group of panelists.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. I'll introduce myself a little bit before we move on to our guests. Again, I am Dr. Camryn Bryant. I am 26 years old. I graduated dental school last year in April of 2022 from the University of Tennessee, but I'm from Arkansas, so let's just put that over there. I am currently an associate in a private practice office. I've been there since I graduated. I am married and I have 2 children covered in fur, but they're children. I guess they don't cost as much, but we're super happy to be with you guys tonight. So I'm going to move on to our guests here. I have Mr. Stephen Dunbar with us and Miss Mackenzie Ellis. Mr. Dunbar is a representative from Equitable Financial Advisors, and Ms. Ellis is from GradFin. So, Mr. Dunbar, could we start with you, and would you mind introducing yourself for me?
Yes. Mr. Bryant, just sound check. Can you hear me okay?
You are doing great, Mr. Dunbar. I'll let you know if you break up at all.
Okay, thank you. So, Stephen Dunbar, I'm with Equitable. I'm thrilled to be here tonight because philosophically for us, it's about taking finances and having them become an enabler to empower the choices we want to make rather than being an inhibitor or a limiter. Our platform is pretty broad. We do holistic planning. Some of the things that we offer are strategies around asset allocation, retirement planning, education funding, survivor planning, estate planning. Dr. Aiken mentioned buying a practice. We can help with some of that planning as well as succession planning. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I hope this talk is useful for all of you as we progress through it. Thanks, Dr. Bryant.
Thanks, Mr. Dunbar. Ms. Ellis, would you mind also introducing yourself as a GradFin representative and then continue on to how you tell us about consulting services that you provide, if you'll switch into that as well?
Yeah, of course. So I'll first start out just going over a little bit myself and GradFin, and then we can switch sides. But yes, my name is Mackenzie Ellis. I come to you from GradFin. I'm a business development associate over here. And at GradFin, we help with student loans, everyone's favorite topic to talk about as dentists. And, as you're coming out of school, you're having, pretty hefty sum there. So at GradFin, exactly like what Mr. Dunbar said, we also take a very holistic approach, but in terms of student loans. They're about 30 minutes long. They are completely free of charge. And they are going to be consultation calls to go over your entire student loan portfolio, go over all of the different options out there. And as I mentioned, we take a very holistic approach where a lot of people, when they talk about student loans and restructuring them, they think refinancing is the only option. And it is certainly an option, but definitely not the only one. And especially with federal student loans, which most dentists graduate with, it's always very important to be going over all of the different federal repayment structures that are offered through the Department of Education, and also all of the possible forgiveness events. So it's really important to do your due diligence, go over all of those different options, which we do on that free consultation call, just to make sure that you're actually picking the best scenario and how you'll save the most money, given your goals and your situation. And, there's a lot of different factors that play into it. And that's why we do that customized plan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ellis, for presenting that to us and also introducing yourself. All right, guys, so you've heard about us, and now we would love to hear about you all. We would like to open up a Zoom poll for everyone, just so we can get an idea of where everybody's at. Like I said, you've heard about us, and we want to hear about you. So Melissa is going to launch a Zoom poll for us. The main question is, how would you best describe your current financial situation? And here are our answers. You have a written financial plan, and we do love that it says written. It's down on paper. It's down in your iPad, wherever it is. You've started planning, but you just kind of need some more guidance. It's a scary world. We understand. Your dog ate, or your child ate your financial plan, or just rah. So please answer those for us. We would love to get your response. I think we'll give that probably about 30 seconds to a minute to get everybody's answers in.
Okay, it looks like it slowed down a little bit. We have about 67%. I'll just give it a few more seconds for everyone to answer.
Sounds great. And Stephen, I did the ARG face just for you. I hope I represented it well.
You absolutely nailed it. You captured the panic perfectly.
Thank you. If anybody's hiring for Broadway, I'm available as a side gig. Wonderful. Thank you guys all for answering those questions. Thank you for bringing up those results. So, majority of us, we're starting to plan. We need some guidance, and then we all need some help. So I'm happy for the people that have some written plans, and let's move forward to see how we can help you guys tonight. The biggest thing about personal finance is that is completely personal to everybody. My plan, Dr. Aiken's plan, Dr. Kim's plan is all different. And my plan is different than it was a year ago, than it was 2 years ago when I was graduating school, that it will be, tomorrow. So again, each of us have our own situations. We're at different stages in our life. We're at different career path. Like I said, I just graduated a couple of years ago. I wrote down I have $327,942.02 at student loans. And I paid my interest in dental school. The interest that I did have. Yes, I was in COVID, and so that's all nonetheless. But that budget changes every day for me, my husband, and the children covered in fur. It all changes. So Dr. Aiken and Dr. Kim, I would love to hear about from you guys kind of the different stages that you're in, how you've gone through your budgeting. I know Dr. Aiken, you mentioned, you bought a practice, so you're a practice owner. Dr. Kim's being the DSO and the sorry, y'all know what I'm talking about. And then myself being an associate. So Dr. Aiken, would you talk a little bit about your stage and life financial goals right now?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to look at it as kind of a linear perspective through time. For me, my financial planning journey started before dental school. I mentioned in my intro, when I graduated, I had a little over $420,000 in student debt, but I did know that I wanted to be a practice owner early in my career. And so started meeting with a financial planner in dental school. Mr. Dunbar may be able to speak better to this, but my experience was when I was in dental school, financial planners were happy to meet with me and not charge me, which was great. They wanted my future business. So for me, I knew what my goal was, and I knew I felt like I needed to work in that direction. So my journey started as an associate in private practice out of dental school. I didn't make a lot of money, but I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be. And so for me, it wasn't a set number that I was putting aside every month for my future practice. It was a percentage of whatever I made, and that made it easier for me with some fluctuations in income. But like I said, I started as an associate, 18 months out of dental school, bought my first practice, took on an additional almost $600,000 in student debt, or not student debt, but personal practice debt at that point. So had $1 million in debt, 18 months out of dental school, but am hopeful that I will have all of my student loans paid off this year and have about 80% of my practice debt paid off by the end of 2024. It's a journey. There's some scary nights in there. I think the rest of the panel will be able to talk about that as well. That being said, I still think dentistry is the best profession in the world, and you can make whatever you want out of it. But you have to know what you want, and you have to know how to get there, and financial planning is the best way to do it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aiken. Dr. Kim, will you talk about the stage that you're in right now? I mean, I know with the newborn, it's definitely kind of thrown a kink in your financial plan and changed things up. So do you want to address kind of your life at this point with your financial plan and how you've adjusted?
Sure. I think it really helps to give a background, because I feel like our attendees, they probably have a spectrum of points in their lives that are in, especially with their career. And so I started at a DSO, and in the beginning they give you a base, but as you go along, it's basically based on production. And so I had a little unpredictability with my income. And then of course, when I got married, that throws another stage in your life where you're combining your income, you're combining your checking account. But I was very fortunate right out of dental school. My financial person that worked at the financial department at my USC School of Dentistry, he ended up being my accountant. And so I had a huge advantage I was able to switch my loans based on his advice. Unfortunately and fortunately, I went to a really awesome school, but it was a private school. And hence, I have over $600,000 in student loans. And so that was my pure goal when I worked at this DSO, was they have a partnership track. And so my goal was to make sure I became a partner, because if you're a partner in that practice, they have many opportunities across the country. And so I'd be able to get a check as an employee, and based off my production, and then I'll get a separate check as a partial owner of the practice. And so my wife and I were able to travel across the country and pick different areas where we thought was a great possibility, because fortunately for myself at the DSO that I worked at, my owner was one of the first 3 owners of that company. And, now they have 1,000 offices across the country. And so we settled upon Palm Springs as a destination, and we were able to buy a house. And this is before the pandemic. But after the pandemic hit, the contract fell through with my partnership. And so my biggest message is that your life stages could change. And obviously the interest, and since we're being very unfiltered and open, I actually put a lot of money in cryptocurrency. And so I don't know whether you know what happened during the pandemic and what's happened more recently. That was actually a big stress, and that was a decision that I made and my wife went along with that actually affected our finances. But I would love to take questions about that. But I transitioned to a private practice. So my mentality was just like Dr. Aiken, where I'm like, I want to own a private practice because you can write things off. People will give you a business loan, but it wasn't quite a good fit. And so now I work for a community health center, and this is my 3rd year of being on the public service loan forgiveness. And so on top of that, just recently, I say within the last 6 months, I was able to get a financial advisor that has helped me from A to Z. And so it took me 9 years to find this person. And so I really want to share that experience. I think we'll get more out of like these interactions and these questions, because he has helped me with my life insurance, my disability insurance. He's literally gone through my retirement. So I had a 401k with my previous employer. I have a 403b with my current employer. He's literally went through the entire thing and told me the exact percentages to put for each fund. And so he's basically changed my life in terms of my financial future, because, before I was saving for the tax bomb. And so I've continued to do that. But your financial situation could change, and so I just want to be very open about my personal situation. And I want you guys to ask questions, because Dr. Aiken's a success story. I've just shared with you how I lost money in cryptocurrency, and I've recovered from it. This is a forum, and so we love to get questions and share each other's journeys and give advice and share our mistakes with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for giving your background and also being so open and transparent with everything. A little bit about mine, when I was in dental school, I thought I was super smart. I somewhat worked in dental school. I made like $1,000 a month, so I didn't make much, but it went to my interest rate because I thought I was super smart. I listened to every podcast. I read every book on student loans. I reached out to other dentists. I did my due diligence. And so for 2018 and 2019, I searched all across different loan programs to get the best interest rate. And then 2020 hit, and all my friends that saved with government loans that had 0 interest, they were all happy. And my loans that I got in 2019 and, January of 2020 were accumulating interest for 2020, 2021, and then 2022. And then I started having to pay those December of 22, like you normally would have, even though loan forgiveness had continued on. So when I was researching everything, I definitely didn't put the global pandemic in my financial plan. That was not my fault. Don't know. But again, something that fluid and changed, and I thought I did everything right. But I mean, that's a couple $100, if not a couple thousand. I mean, more, I say a couple hundred, couple of thousands of dollars that I thought I was doing right that I ended up having to pay for. I do the same thing that Dr. Aiken does. I do all of my finances in percentages on what I can save, on what I can spend. And since girl math is a thing right now, my girl math is that I take my base rate that my employer says she'll pay me, and that's what I make my budget off. So when my production is higher than that, that's just free money to either save towards a practice.
This meeting is being recorded.
To save, towards buying a practice like I want to save towards buying a house, to have an emergency fund if anything were to happen, to have savings, to have a child. So that's all my girl math on that. It's just free money if I make my budget off of my base rate. So thank you all so much again for giving us your kind of background and everything. So we'll continue on to this really awesome planning tool provided to us by Mr. Dunbar. It's kind of a 2-part tool The first part is your planning tool to write everything and everybody that means something to you, your top 10, these are my people, and then write their ages and see where they're going to be at the next 5, 10, 15 years. Mr. Dunbar was talking to us and had a good point that, when you're writing somebody's age 15 years out, he was writing his parents, and then he was like, wait, do I have 15 more years with them? Do I only have 5 or 10? How do I want to spend those 5 or 10 years with them? Because a lot of us do this. It's not just for us, it's for the people around us and to make the lives of all of us really good. So this example was provided to us by Dr. Aiken. So thank you so much, Dr. Aiken, for letting us use yours. And again, what this is on here is a lot of Dr. Aiken's people. We all filled this out. And so Mr. Dunbar, will you kind of talk a little bit about the purpose of this tool, and then Sean, we'll have you talk through your people and then go on to the next example as well, please. Thank you so much.
So the purpose of the tool is really to focus our planning, because when we are doing planning, it is difficult to stick to it when life throws the curveballs at us. And what this tool does is it focuses on the why first. I'm sure you all know Simon Sinek talks about starting with why. We focus on the people that are important to us first, and that gives us a North Star so that when things get difficult, because we're anchored in why we're doing it and who matters to us, we have a tendency to stick with the plan. And what this does is shows you, as you progress the people in your life, it just gives you a sense of focus so that when you have to make that tough choice between retirement account or paying down debt, or you have to make that tough choice between doing something on the personal side or investing and buying a practice, you can look at it through the lens of the people that matter to you and the big events you're trying to accomplish. So the other part of this tool is first the people, and then the second part of the tool is who do you want to be, what do you want to do, and what do you want to have in the same kind of time frame. So it's the people first, and then it's the things you're trying to either be, become, or have. And this gives you a simple piece of paper that really orients all of your thinking, because as one of the phrases I love is, when values are clear, decisions are easy. And what you're doing with this piece of paper is putting the things that are important to your values in one place so you can make your decisions with it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dunbar. So we're going to move into that second part of this tool. Sean, can you kind of walk us through this one on your B's, do's, and haves for your next couple of years?
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's a valuable tool, even 5 years out of dental school now. I kind of had my written financial plan, but I thought that Stephen bringing in, like, what are we even doing this for in the first place, was a really good way to center my thoughts on it. And this was a really easy tool to be able to visualize those things. So on my list, I had my core people, my wife and my daughter right now are the two most important things to me. We would like another kid at some point. Hopefully that works out. I've got a good friend who's battling brain cancer. That changes the way that I run my business and I spend my time. My dental school classmate, who's now my partner, or we're moving towards partnership, she's on my list. Her success is important to me. And then I've got 3 friends that were on the ASDA board with me when I was on ASDA that I lean on every single day for advice, clinically, emotionally, just in everything that I do financially. They're great. And we do an annual trip that we started 3 years ago that we haven't missed yet. And that is part of my plan. Like I plan for that. So this chart here, be, do, and have. B for me was more like, what is my identity? How do I, really view myself? And so you can see there, I'm not going to go through and read them all. You guys are all probably smarter than I am. And there may even be some typos in there. So don't take it too tough on me for those. But the identity that I want to become is different now than it'll be 3 years from now, than it'll be 5 years from now. And part of that is where my loved ones will be 1, 3, and 5 years from now. Having an 18-month-old is different than having a 7-year-old. And for me to think about that kind of helped me as well in my practice. It's like I'm 32, 33 years old. I've put a lot into my practice, but I know it seems crazy to say in my early 30s, but I want to step back as my daughter grows up and be able to spend more time with her. The do thing, that's fun. To me, the reason that we got into dentistry is you want that work-life balance. My experience has been dentistry will allow you to do that. So traveling, taking on volunteer roles like I have with the New Dentist Committee, which has been a wonderful part of my leadership journey. You can see mom's getting ready to turn 60. We are going to take an awesome trip that I'm going to pay for. And that is an awesome thing for me, but I think something that she'll appreciate as well. And then kind of long-term investment options. I want to get into commercial real estate. I want to own the building I practice in. I want to be a pillar in my community. And then the haves on the side are fun too. Like I said, a lot of us, I feel like, focus a ton on student debt when we're looking at this financial planning situation, as we should. And the thing that was really eye-opening for me was, we think about student debt and we think about compounding interest. The flip side of it is once you get out and you can start putting money away, that compounding interest starts working for you as opposed to working against you. So you guys heard me mention, I've been putting away 20% of my paycheck since the day I graduated in an investment account that I know, it doesn't even actually hit my bank account. I don't think about it. It's not money that I ever have. It is money for the future. And that has helped me with my budget a little bit. I have some goals. I've bought 2 additional practices since my first one. So I want to have this wonderful, thriving practice where my patients are well cared for. And then I want to start really getting into, I would love a second home, and I would love to work 3.5 days a week, and I would love all these things. And so that is kind of setting my vision and setting my budget and setting my finances as I look into the future. And I think that's what this chart has done. Stephen, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, think about the fact that you want to take your mom on that trip, how that orients your efforts and your planning. It really gives you something exciting to plan around. So the planning process is not just complicated mathematics that we can get lost in the weeds on. So you did a great job.
Thank you both so much. Howard, do you have a few items that are any different than Sean's that you would like to discuss or share?
Yeah, of course. I think first and foremost, the reason why I'm on one of the panelists is that even like a couple of years back, I never thought that I'd be, this involved with organized dentistry. And so you just never know. Like if you say volunteer and say yes to a few things, it can actually really explode. And so, my passion has become about talking about DSOs because I had such a positive experience my first half of my career, my early career. And then talking about community health centers, Dr. Elena's online. She's a director at a fairly qualified health center. And for me, I didn't even know that that was a possibility in terms of my career. And so being very active is very fulfilling. I know we have a lot of new dentists here, and eventually, your membership dues go up. And it's very important to realize that for myself, like it wouldn't matter if it's $2,000 or $5,000 for the membership dues, because the ADA, for myself, the California Dental Association, and for myself, the LA Dental Society, they do so much for my career. And so that's first and foremost. And secondly, being very passionate about, serving the most in need. Like I felt like throughout my career, I was able to do a lot. I was able to work with CEREC machines, do all on fours, learn implant courses. I was able to consider buying a practice, but working for basically serving all Medicaid patients is something that I feel very passionate about. And so my financial goals have changed. In the beginning, I wanted to be a practice owner and make as much money as I want, because as a practice owner, you can dictate, you can work 6 days a week and try to grow your practice. But for me, in my situation, it was actually a big relief that, I'm on a public service loan forgiveness because I went to a private school. And so, you should definitely contact GradFin because the SAVE program is ridiculously good. I was able to read the details, and I actually switched last week because of how great this program is that the Biden administration and the White House put forth. And just like Dr. Aiken was saying, I never thought I'd be, this 9 years out of school, I actually do about 25 to 30% administrative work with my executives I meet. And so I don't see patients. And so because I want to spend more time with my daughter, and I don't want to, wreck my body, I am in my 40s because I started dental school a little bit later. And so I see myself transitioning to like a 50% admin and eventually 75 to 100, because that's actually where I feel like my strengths are. Currently we have 7 dentists, 5 different clinics at my community health center. We're continuing to grow, and it's going to take more time away from my direct patient care. And so, I encourage everyone that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who you're going to marry. You don't know what your situation will be in 5 years, but I was reading the chat. It's definitely very, very important that even if you save a little, even if you put away a little, and obviously what Dr. Aiken was saying, it doesn't hit your bank account, it just goes out. That'll make a huge difference, because basically, when you look at your career, it's all about time. It's about the earlier you start, no matter how little, it'll just compound on itself. And so you may not really see the results next year or 5 years. It'll take 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And I can definitely tell you, I think I speak for everyone. I don't think all of us want to work until we're 60 or 70 or 75, because we know that faculty member who has their hands shaking at 75. So I think it's very important that, we have this discussion about finances, personal finances. It's been very big on the internet. And so, I just want to share with that. And I love what was shared about trips. I think that definitely orients you. My wife has never, my wife and I were both born in South Korea, but my wife has never been back in 35. Our daughter is 2 months old, and we're saving to take that trip for my daughter to go to the homeland of her parents, and for my wife to visit, and she hasn't been in over 30 years. And so you can have fun with it. We need a bigger car. We have a small sedan right now. We've been saving, we've been thinking about this. That car seat barely fits in my small car. And so if you plan ahead, you can make your dreams come true. I believe we have the greatest profession in the world. And so I definitely encourage you to, ask questions as we go along with this town hall.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Howard. One thing, this is a very fluid document. Filling out this document this year could be different than next year's. I mean, your 1-year plan changes all the time. I think the whole thought about this is, everything that we could do to have a community and have these ADA resources available to us. Like I said, in dental school, I researched every podcast, everything. Again, like Sean said, a lot of places will give you free consults, but it's really hard to say no to people when you took an hour of their time and you're like, okay, thanks, bye, and just hang up. Those are uncomfortable things to do to people. So with the ADA kind of vetting these people for us, it's easier to me, like, okay, the ADA has vetted Mr. Dunbar, so I might give him a little bit more a benefit of doubt, listen to him a little bit more, just because somebody in my shoes has already done it. It's not the guy that I talk to that's like, oh yeah, I work with dentists all the time. And it's like, yeah, but do you work with new dentists? Like, my age, in my demographic, in my fee schedule, are you just like, oh yeah, you should be able to give me $1,000 a month, I'll invest it and we'll be good? Like, that's super hard. And it's hard when you're not a dentist and you don't have a career, when you don't know these things. We like to know things and we don't. So with the ADA and these resources that we have in this community, I've been able to reach out to my fellow NDC members, fellow ADA members that I've met at different yearly meetings, just people I would have never run into from, North Carolina and California and New York. And I have their cell phone number. I can be like, hey, when you were buying your practice, did you talk to this person? How did you do this? What do you think of owner financing? What do you think about this bank? This is what they're saying. I don't know these things. And so it's really great to have this community and these resources that the ADA provides. So we'll kind of continue on into just the climate of the world and how times kind of change around us. Kind of now that we have, our financial goals down, they're written down. Also, Tara's going to send out this planning tool to everyone. So you can have this to really write it down, get it out of your head, get it on paper and just, look at it. But we're going to kind of move on to talk about the current financial environment. So Ms. Ellis, would you kind of talk about what's some important things to know from a student loan perspective? We all have them. They're kind of all different. So what are some few things? Howard mentioned the SAVE plan. I know that's kind of like an income-based repayment. I honestly just switched to it a couple weeks ago as well, because I checked my finances last year. It was time for me to check my student loans and write down my budget again. And so student loans were in that, budget as well. And then just kind of where people can go to get this information, who they can talk to. So Ms. Ellis, can we go to you, please?
Of course, yeah, and we're gonna hit a few different topics here. So bear with me. We're gonna take a long train ride down student loans. But the first thing I wanted to mention, and as Dr. Bryant was saying, it's very important, first off, to know the information about your student loans. Do your due diligence. Take a look at what you have. Dentists obviously come out with having, over $300,000 in student loan debt by the time they graduate. That's just the average. People have even more than that. So that's a lot of loans to keep track of. So first thing to do, and obviously we haven't had to think about these in over 3 years. So first thing to do is just really get to know your student loans. What are the types of loans you have? When we talk about student loans, you can break them down into 2 different categories. It's going to be a private student loan versus a federal student loan. And the difference, really quick sidebar, difference between those are private student loans are going to be obviously privately held. Those would be your Sallie Mae loans, your Discover loans, any bank down the street, any credit union. Those are going to be your private student loans. Those types of loans are very straightforward. The only option with private student loans is to refinance them. So, with private student loans, you would just look at the interest rate. If it's a high rate, go to a lender, look to refinance. Very, very straightforward on that end. Whereas federal student loans, they're, I don't want to say better to have, but you have more flexibility. So with federal student loans, you have about 10 different federal repayment structures that are already just offered through the Department of Education. You have 3 possible forgiveness events. One of those are specifically for teachers. So I will say, obviously it doesn't pertain to you. So 2 different forgiveness events that you could possibly pursue. And then obviously you can always refinance your federal student loans. Now, one thing I want to say about refinancing your federal student loans is Dr. Bryant was alluding to in the beginning, is once you refinance a federal student loan, it becomes private and you do lose all of that federal privilege. And that's why it is so important before you refinance, just to make sure you are doing your due diligence. Obviously, you can't plan for a pandemic, so I completely understand that situation. But making sure, you're going through maybe an income-driven repayment structure is best for me. Maybe I do qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So really just making sure you are taking those steps to see, is this actually the best route for me? And also crunching the numbers just to make sure that's, in the long run, how you'll save the most money, which, as I mentioned, we always do on that consultation call. But how to actually find this information, first thing I want to mention is log on for federal student loans, log on to, it's called studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov is owned by the Department of Education. Everyone usually, 99% of people have an account there if you have federal student loans, just because this is actually where you went to receive them. It's where you went for the FAFSA application. So you might forget your password if it's been a decent bit of time, but you can reset that. So log on your portal. It basically gives you a blueprint of every piece of information you need to know about your federal student loans that are in your name, your repayment history, who your loan servicer is, what's your monthly payment, what's your interest rate, what is your balance. Everything you need to know is going to be found there. So that's the first step, is really getting to know your student loans to begin with. The other thing I just wanted to mention, everyone's situation is going to be different. I wish we could blanket statement and just say, this is, you're a dentist, this is what you need to do. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. As we learned today, everyone's situation is going to be different. And there are so many compounding factors that are going to, play a big role in what's the best option for you. So for example, like Dr. Kim was saying, he's pursuing public service loan forgiveness because he has an eligible employer. That's a great route to go. Whereas for another dentist, refinancing because they have a high interest rate may be the best way to go. Whereas for someone else, maybe just income-driven repayment. And maybe, they'll have to switch sometime down the road because their circumstances change. So unfortunately, we cannot blanket statement this, but there are so many options out there. A few different updates I just wanted to mention really quick. Obviously, the CARES Act ended. This is old news. Interest rates began to resume on September 1st, so no longer at 0%, and then payments began on October of 2023, so everyone should be making those payments right now. But the other big change is going to be with that new SAVE plan. And this is probably the biggest change that the Department of Education put out this last year. And before I get into just a little bit about the changes on that, I want you to kind of understand, and we are truly going to scratch the surface here, about income-driven repayment, because SAVE falls under that category. So income-driven repayment is a type of federal student loan repayment strategy. And with that, there are 4 different options to pick from, SAVE being one of them, but there's 3 others as well. And each one, they're very complex. They're arguably one of the most complex federal student loan repayment strategies out there, because each one has their own rules and regulations, monthly payment calculators, different factors that play into them. So there's a lot that goes into it. But with them, basically the general gist of it is it is going to be based on a certain percentage of your discretionary income. But also income-driven repayment structures, that's where you're going to possibly qualify for different forgiveness events as well. So that's also why people pursue it. But with that new SAVE plan, it's going to be about, right now, it is 10% of your discretionary income. Next year, next summer, it can possibly go down to 5%, or a weighted average. So it would still be a little bit lower than 10%. So that's one of the biggest changes, is it can possibly cut your monthly payment in half or make it a little bit lower come next summer. The other thing with this, it is an uncapped payment, which means, typically with other income-driven repayment structures, it can be capped at a certain amount. SAVE, that's why it's important to just make sure you're running the numbers, just to make sure that's actually going to be the best scenario for you. But also, there's no interest compounding on the new SAVE plan, which is amazing. It's one of the biggest issues with different income-driven repayment structures. And SAVE is the only plan that your interest is not compounding, which is absolutely amazing. So a great program for a lot of people. For other people, it may not make sense. And that's why it's always important to just run those numbers. One thing I want to mention, at GradFin, we always run all those different numbers on a consultation call, but just in case you want to, do it tonight or do it sometime this week, on studentaid.gov, they also have a basically simulator of what your loans would look like on each one of those plans that are pretty accurate numbers as well. So in case you want to, do that sooner rather than later, highly recommend going on there. But with that, I know that was a ton of information. So I will pause there, and we'll wait for questions at the end to get into more of that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Miss Ellis. Mr. Dunbar, I'd like to kind of turn it over to you a little bit on some key things that maybe new dentists should know about today's environment. And we'll also kind of talk about your little hope slide, but kind of some good things that we could use as new dentists in today's time.
For sure. And what I'll do, Dr. Bryant, is I'll just keep it to 2 quick things so we have time for people to really engage. 2 things I want to make sure people think about, because in this environment of uncertainty, and we're probably going to have uncertainty for some time, inflation and income taxes. Right now, the giant thing everyone is dealing with is the student loans and how to really manage them and put yourself in the best position to deal with the student loans. The next 2 mountains to climb are going to be, how do you manage inflation and how do you manage income taxation? So what I mean by inflation is this: if I'm living on $50,000 today, 25 years from now, it'll take 100,000 to live the same lifestyle. Or if I'm living on 100 today, it'll take 200 to live the same lifestyle. That embedded cost of inflation is something we want to try and stay ahead of, which is why financial planning, a written financial plan with strategies to address that, becomes so important. The second thing is income taxation. This could be a topic for a lot of discussion, but most people, when asked the question, do you expect income taxes to go down, stay the same, or increase? 9 out of 10 people have the perspective that income taxes are going to be increasing. We are, sadly, if you look at our income tax rates going back to the 1900s, we are in a historically low income tax rate environment. What that means is, if I have $2 million saved for retirement, but I have all of that in a pre-tax plan, i.e. a 401k, 403b, 457, so on and so forth, I am only able to access about 70 to 80% of that, because I'm going to have to pay taxes when I take that money out. The other account that we want to make sure we have built up is a tax-free account. The biggest thing I see about planning is people are heavily weighted in the tax bucket, which is like investment accounts and CDs and that kind of thing, or they are heavily weighted in the retirement plan bucket. Most people are missing a tax-free bucket. The one most people know about is a Roth IRA, but there are so many more things people can do now to get that same tax treatment with better funding options, more growth possibilities, etc. So those are the 2 things I'd be thinking about. I will say, Dr. Kim mentioned at the beginning, figuring out the debt with Ms. Ellis is important. Once you sort of think about that, the rest of your life has to be thought about. And that's where a written financial plan comes in. Because of the new dentist committee and because of Rita and ADA, my team will do a complimentary written financial plan for everyone. If you have one, think of it as a second set of eyes. If you don't have one, we will encourage you to please take advantage of it. This is in no way an attempt to sell anybody anything. We have been vetted to offer this on a complimentary basis. It's a written plan that is not about products. It's just to give you a roadmap so you have sort of a Google Maps for your finances so you get to your destination on purpose. I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Bryant.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Rita and the ADA and your team for coordinating this and getting this for us. Like I've said before, Mr. Dunbar is an awesome guy. He's very knowledgeable. I've had the pleasure of speaking with him on a couple of bases and has really enjoyed his insight. So it's really important, like you said, to have a written financial plan, and they can be there to help you do that or just tweak what you've got. So everybody, I'd love for y'all to scan this QR code, get your, complimentary kind of financial plan, get that started. I think it takes about 15 to 20 minutes if I'm remembering correctly. So really great resource there. Thank you, Stephen, for verifying that. And so these are just baby steps that you can start. It is a big world out there. Like if I even knew that there was more than one Roth IRA and one 401k, Stephen started throwing out numbers. I thought we were singing the alphabet. So there's much more out there, and we're dentists. We weren't taught this, so we have to learn it now. So we are ahead of the game, like Stephen said, because the world is just going to keep on changing, and people are going to move around it, or we're just going to be left behind. So we, as the NDC, we want to challenge you to, use these resources provided by the ADA and do everything great. So I would love to move it into kind of opening up for questions. I've seen a lot of questions going through the chat. Thank you for my fellow NDC members for answering a lot of those. One question that we had come in is before the meeting started was, how should we prioritize investing outside of retirement accounts when we have massive amount of debt? Again, this is my thing. I like percentages, so I like to keep it to a percentage of my income goes to savings. A percentage of my income goes to my student loans. But Stephen or Ms. Ellis, if you'd like to kind of talk about prioritizing anything like that, my fellow panelists, please continue. And then as we move forward, if y'all have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or after we have a pause, I'll ask if anybody needs to open up their mute or unmute themselves and ask questions.
Maybe I'll take a first stab at it, Dr. Bryant. So the debt is very important. It is important to reduce our debt for a lot of reasons, including if I'm going to buy a practice, I want to be more financeable. I want to have less debt. The debt can create a lot of emotional stress on us, having a large debt balance. Debt can be very limiting because of all the money it takes to service it. So it is important to deal with the debt. I will say, though, that even as you're managing the debt, even if it is a percentage that's small or a dollar amount that's small, consistent behavior over a long period of time is really how wealth is created. Most people think wealth is created with home runs, and there's some lucky ones that will get an inheritance and that kind of thing. But really, wealth is all about living below my means and small, consistent behavior over a long period of time. I will say two simple things around that. Number one, if I want to save $10,000 over the course of a year, that takes $27 a day. And most people don't process it that way, but it's just the small, consistent things over a long period of time. The other thing I'll say is the idea of investing. If you're in the market for about 20 years and you stay invested, you could generate over 9.5%. But here's the thing I want to caution people about. That same period of time, if I miss only the 10 best days in the market, that 9.5 drops to 5.2%. If I miss the 30 best days in the market, that 9.5 drops to 0.3%. So my point to you is, yes, start small, be consistent, and it's time in the market, not timing the market.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, Stephen. I know for me, sometimes you have this like soul crushing amount of debt and that sits over your head, and that's scary. And it's easier to say this now, a couple years out and into practice and whatever else. But sometimes if you can strip the emotion out of it, of that big number, and just go to X's and O's, black and white, Like most of my student loans are between 5.5% and 6.5%, and that's what mine are. But that's very different than Camryn's. It's different than Howard's. It's different than whatever else. So for me, if my average student loan, let's call it, is 5%, and the market is 9%, it makes me more incentivized to want to put money in the market. And sure, my student loans are still a priority, but it's just a numbers game at that point. It is, my money goes 4% further in investments than it does paying on student loans. So I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to be very strategic about, okay, does it make sense for me to pay off the rest of my student loans, or does it make more sense to me to pay my practice loan, or to put it in investments, or to put it into a, investment vehicle or whatever else. And I know, again, in the moment, sometimes that can be a really tough decision, but I think that's where having a written financial plan where you can just go to that and say, hey, you know what, this is the smart decision that I've already put on paper, and you strip those emotions out, it makes it a little bit easier to manage some of those tough decisions.
Dr. Bryant, can I just say one thing real quick, because Dr. Aiken just really visualized it well. The reason to have a written financial plan is because I can sit down January 1st and I can say, what if I earn 7% instead of 6%? Where will I end up at the end of 2024? What if my interest rate on my debt is 5.5 or 6 versus 5.5? Where do I end up at the end of 2024? The financial plan is not some static document that we create and put on a shelf. It's actually a time machine. Every time you write it, you decide you want to play around with scenarios. You get in a time machine, you write in the scenarios. It fast forward either a year or 3 years or 10 years, and it tells you where you will end up. That's the beauty of a plan. It takes all of the anxiety out of decisions because you can look at it, as Dr. Aiken said, in math and black and white.
So, Mr. Dunbar, I want to play off what you just said right now. I think, as I shared with everyone, I've only been able to find a financial planner in the last 6 months. And so I think everyone is curious, like, at the rate you're saving right now, do you have to work until you're 80? And so what I was able to visually see is that if I save X, Y, Z, because my financial planner was like, you're not saving enough in your Roth and your 401k and your 403b, because this is what it looks like 10, 20, and he's projecting, and obviously he's being very conservative, but that is very important to know. And as a student coming out of school with over $600,000 in debt, that wasn't even on my radar. I was wondering about my next paycheck and worried about the tax bomb. And so I think, what Dr. Dunbar is, offering is tremendous, that it's written. And, I'm sure he can share you things like that. And I think that will benefit everyone, no matter what industry you are in. And especially with us, and to be honest, we take on more debt than the medical students, hands down. Dental school is way more expensive. And so I think it's very important for us, to be financially responsible and start early. And I'm glad everyone's here.
Can I, so it's a little bit like people will say, and we've all heard it, before I go to the doctor, I want to get in shape a little bit. Don't wait for your debt to be resolved or you feel like you have a sense of clarity. It's never too early to have your written plan, because as Dr. Kim is saying, it will give you a lot of relief, knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. That's really what it does. It just shows you not only that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it'll tell you about when that light will materialize. And that puts a bounce in your step as you go back into your work world.
Thank you all for that fantastic insight. Would anybody like to propose some questions? Feel free to unmute and ask our panelists. I haven't seen anything in the chat come up just yet. All right, if I'm not seeing any questions, not hearing any questions, I would love to move on and talk about just a few closing remarks. Get us, we've talked about a lot. So let's just leave you with some high points
two
here.
Questions, actually.
Of course you can.
There's 2 questions in the chat.
Sorry, let's find them. Sorry, guys. Okay, let's see. So our first question is, planning for the tax bomb a wise decision? So would somebody mind kind of describing what a tax bomb is, just for maybe some of our listeners that might not entirely know what that means, and then talk about planning for it.
So I would say it this way, and the person who asked the question, if I'm not addressing what you want to hear, please give us more data. But what if I said to you this? Each of you could decide today what your tax rate would be when you get to retirement. You get to choose it. What if I said I could give you that power to decide today what your tax rate will be when you get to retirement? Would you take that? Would you take me up on that offer? Most people would say yes. They wouldn't want to get to retirement and by accident see what their rates are based on their income they need at that point. So planning around this tax bond, the idea of it is this: if I diversify my assets, and most people think of diversity as mixture of stocks and bonds, different kinds of stocks, large cap, small cap, international, domestic. That's one kind of diversification. The other diversification is diversification of my tax buckets or my tax rate. If I diversify my location of my assets today, I can live on a $300,000 income in retirement and pay a marginal tax rate of maybe 21%. Whereas if I don't do that work today, that $300,000 lifestyle would cost me 30% plus in income taxation. So yes, it is wise to plan, and the sooner we start planning, the better, because it creates more flexibility. That's the idea of doing planning early, is you create flexibility for yourself, as opposed to being stuck with whatever you have if you haven't planned.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Bryce, send me a thumbs up if that answered your question. And while you're doing that, I'll get our next question. It said, how soon should you buy a house after graduation, and what should you consider? Just my personal opinion, the going rate is it all depends. I will tell you, in my personal opinion of planning on my 1 to 5 year plan, I would like to buy a practice, and at some point I'd like to buy a home. I want a house on the lake, and so those properties come and go very quickly. So I want to plan accordingly. Well, I want the practice first, and then I was going to buy a house. My banker said, if you buy the practice first, your employment status changes from, I'm sorry, I'm not good. I'm a 1099 employee, I think is the term. Whatever the tax form that I fill out at the end of the year that my CPA knows, I will change from being an employee to an owner. And as that, I have to show 2 years of income before I can buy a house. So that's one factor that I've come in play with. So anybody else have thoughts on how soon should you buy a house after graduation, and then what should you consider?
So I would love to hear Dr. Akins and Mr. Dunbar's opinion on this, because I want to be honest. I live in Southern California, and a house that we want in the area that I live, I live in Pasadena, or in that area, and a house that we want is $2 million, because 1.5 or a little over $1 million will get us 2 beds, 1 bath, single family house. And so I've read numerous articles, and I believe it is smart to rent right now, if I'm not mistaken, because the interest rates are so high. But I love Dr. Akins' story, and I'd love to hear what Dr. Dunbar's opinion is on this.
Dr. Akin, why don't you go first, so you give the practical perspective?
Sure. So this was a big question for me when I was coming out of school, because I wanted to own a home and I knew I wanted to own a practice early, and I didn't want either of them to negatively affect the other. So as we were looking for a house, I kind of clued them in on my long-term plans of buying a practice, and the bank that we were working with actually encouraged me to buy the home. And they looked at that favorably when I went to buy a practice. Not just because they knew I had some years of payment history on my mortgage and, this, that, and the other, but also just from a reality standpoint on them, they had something that if my practice failed, they could take my home too, just from a business perspective. So for me, I said it in the chat, but I bought my house 5 weeks out of dental school. We lived in that house for 3.5 years. We met some of our best friends. It increased in value almost 30% while we were in it. And so that was my down payment for my practice in the next home. So, I think it depends on the individual situation. If I was in LA, I think my life would be very different. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. I moved here from Atlanta, Georgia, and was shocked at how affordable real estate is here. So I think a lot of it depends. But if it's something where, again, you have a written financial plan and you have a business plan, and you bring those to the table with whoever your lender is, they're going to steer you in the right direction, because they want to be a partner with you for life. dentists are great people to lend to for both practices and homes. And so, it should all be part of that holistic plan that everyone on this panel has been talking about tonight. But that was how it worked for me.
And the only thing I'll add to that, because I think that's great advice that Dr. Aiken has given, is here's one thing I would say. When you buy your first home, I would encourage you not to reach too big on your first home. That is a piece of advice I would give. Don't go too big on the first home, because the conventional wisdom was when you buy your first home, buy the big house because you'll grow into it. I would actually counsel you to not do that. Buy something that works for you and plan to upgrade later. And then as far as the specific timing, it'd be dangerous to give blanket advice to 90 people. Let's do the written plan and we can help you decide where you should do it right now or 6 months from now or a year from now.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to let everybody know we have reached 8 p.m. Like Tara said in the chat. We would love to stay on and talk with you guys. I think all of our panelists might be okay with that. If anybody needs to jump off, feel free, let me know, or just jump off. You don't have to let me know. And but maybe we'll continue a few more questions here. I have a few more in the chat. My first one that I had was, I was recently told that I should put 20% of each paycheck into my 401k as well as my husband's to be ready for retirement. Mr. Dunbar, I think this would be something for you. Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts?
My answer would be to put in enough at a minimum to maximize the match available from the employer. So it is not likely 20%. Most employers are matching somewhere around 5.5% to 7.5%. So we want to put in at least enough to get the full match, because that's free money we shouldn't leave on the table. Anything over that, we have to make a choice as to whether we do it in the pre-tax, after-tax, or the tax-free bucket. And that's going to be based on the plan and what we're trying to achieve from the plan. So that would be my answer. I wouldn't default to a 20% contribution to my retirement account.
Thank you so much. Again, do your financial plan and it'll be written down and it'll be individualized to you. But great question. I've got another question, likely for Mr. Dunbar. What are some tax advantages that associates, so your non-business owners, can take advantage of? Second part, any suggestions for retirement planning for associates without access to a 401k?
Yes, we'll do them in reverse order. For those who have access to a 401k, you can take advantage of IRAs to get to the same place. So depending on your age, you can put in around $5,500 and then it goes up from there. But you can look at either regular IRAs, which are going to be deductible, grow tax deferred, and come out fully taxable. Or you can look at a Roth IRA, which goes in after tax. But then the benefit of that is once it's invested in Roth, you no longer pay tax on either growth or the distribution. And that's going to depend on if you're on your income level, because at a certain income level, you don't qualify for a Roth anymore. And they index that number up every year. So if you are above the threshold where you qualify for a Roth, and that's generally, I could look it up for 2024, but it's going to be low six figures where you start aging out. And what happens is it starts it starts in the 70s, and then it sort of reduces down the amount of money that you can put into a Roth on a percentage basis. If you can't use a Roth, then you're going to be using cash value life insurance as a way to get to the same place. So those will be your options for saving. Now, in terms of tax strategies for those that are basically W-2 employees, somewhat limited because you're a W-2 employee, but I would rather talk about have a check with your accountant on that and not be giving tax advice.
Thank you, Thomas. Mr. Dunbar. I'm just going to verify with you that I heard that correct and that I know what I'm talking about. When you said cash value life insurance, that's usually your whole life insurance, correct?
Oh, great question. So yeah, let me keep this short. There are actually multiple kinds of insurance. There's whole life, universal life, index universal life, variable universal life. Here's the difference. Whole life is a guaranteed contract, meaning the equity in the contract grows on a guaranteed rate provided by the insurance company. As you move to those other kinds, you move away from guarantees and towards return being based on how the stocks and bonds you own inside the insurance contract perform. I will say to you, interestingly, most people default to whole life. It is not always the best solution because it takes more premium to get the same bang for your buck. So it's neither good nor bad. It just depends on the circumstances. but I wouldn't default to just always doing whole life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So in the value of everybody's time, I have not seen any more questions come through the chat. Yeah, nothing really come through the chat. So kind of your normal financial health checks. So again, you want your written plan, and then kind of go through your, daily, weekly, monthly checklist. So daily, be aware of what you're spending. Weekly, just kind of check your bank accounts, make sure something didn't come up that, there's some subscription you forgot about, or this, that, or the other. Just make a quick thing. Watching compound interest monthly, checking all your credit cards. We're super good about having all these emails in our account saying, here's your credit card statement, this, and we don't really, always look at those. So make sure you're checking those so you're aware and on top of these things. Review your loans and investments, and then, annually redo your big rock, check your credit scores and everything. Very important things. Write these down, check them. Me personally, I check my student loans monthly. I make sure my SAFE plan's running appropriately. I make sure I was paying what I thought I should be. And I caught a catch in it, something that had messed up. My auto pay kicked out. I lost my 2.5% and I had been delayed on my loan. But I knew that because I had seen that it hadn't come out my bank account. So furthermore, just kind of some of your ADA resources that we have, you need to check them out, see what, the ADA does and can do for everybody and for you. So we have our Equitable Finance Advisors that Mr. Dunbar works with there, and then with Laurel Road and Gradfin, how we heard from Miss Ellis. Just check out all those things. I've got the links to those pages on the next slide, so you can go to those, check everything out. These are great resources that the ADA has helped provide. Listen to our dental sound bites on debt management and solutions. And that is all I have for everybody tonight.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.